apparent impunity of those who engage in violence against Palestinians, by the use of excessive force, by attacks on health services, and by the ever-increasing arbitrary detention and ill-treatment of Palestinians, including children. Further, as explained in our written pleadings, Israel has engaged in acts that constitute crimes against humanity and has failed to prevent and punish such crimes. Mr. President, members of the Court, I now turn to question B and to my sixth and final point. What the General Assembly asks you to determine is whether the occupation as such is unlawful. Three essential principles should guide the Court in responding to question B. These principles are fundamental to the law of occupation, and they reflect Jus Cogens norms. First, occupation is by its very nature temporary. It must not become permanent or indefinite. Second, the occupying power cannot acquire sovereignty over the occupied territory, whether by annexation or in any other way. Third, the occupying power has the duty to respect the right to self-determination of the people of the occupied territory, as well as all their human rights. Israel's occupation contravenes each of these fundamental principles. Israel's policy of settlements, including the transfer of settlers, the confiscation of land, and the forcible displacement of Palestinian communities, evidences Israel's intention to occupy permanently and to annex territory that belongs to the Palestinian people. Israel's serious breaches of the right to self-determination, the principle of non-acquisition of territory by force, and the prohibition of discrimination, all Jus Cogens norms, leave no doubt that the occupation as a whole is unlawful. The occupation is being carried out for purposes contrary to international law. Mr. President, I now turn to the legal consequences arising from the unlawful occupation of the occupied Palestinian territory. A principal consequence is that Israel must end its occupation of the whole of the occupied Palestinian territory, that is the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and Gaza. This must be done, as we said in our written pleadings, as a matter of urgency and as rapidly as possible. Another legal consequence is that all states are obliged not to recognize the unlawful situation created by Israel's policies and practices, and not to render any assistance that may serve to further those policies and practices. The content of these obligations was set out by Palestine on Monday in some detail. States must, moreover, cooperate with the competent organs of the United Nations to bring the unlawful occupation to an end. A further obligation binds states to investigate, prosecute and punish any individual subject to their jurisdiction for grave breaches of the Geneva Conventions and crimes against humanity. The United Nations, and especially the General Assembly and the Security Council, must take measures to end the illegal occupation, taking due account of the advisory opinion to be given. Before concluding, Mr. President, I must emphasize, in the light of what some others have said, that until Israel withdraws from the occupied Palestinian territory, it remains obliged to respect in full international humanitarian law and international human rights law. Israel's obligations under these bodies of law continue to apply, even though the occupation as such is unlawful. Mr. President, members of the Court, that concludes Jordan's submissions, and we thank you for your attention.
I thank the delegation of Jordan for its presentation, which brings to a close.
Well, if you're just joining us here on Al Jazeera, we've been listening to Jordan giving their submission to the UN's top court in The Hague into the legal consequences of Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territories. Now, the kingdom has been clear there can be no peace until the occupation ends, and also says there is no doubt that Israel is trying to annex the occupied Palestinian territories. Well, let's now go to Step Vasson. She's outside the International Court of Justice in The Hague and listening in for us. Step, Jordan reiterating the regional position here on this conflict.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have to know that Jordan has sent the highest level delegation to The Hague so far with two ministers. The Minister of Foreign Affairs spoke first and then the Minister of Justice, and they called this occupation an evil occupation, and also the settlements in the West Bank the sources of all evil. And what was also interesting to hear from Jordan is that they also say, like what we heard before from Ireland, that other states have an obligation to follow the international law and also take consequences of the illegal occupation. Basically, what Ireland said is after Russia annexed and occupied Crimea, there were immediate sanctions and repercussions by other countries. Something similar now is also said by Jordan. Other states have to follow these consequences as well. And we heard before from other countries, also China, arguing against what the United States has been saying yesterday, that the court has no position to rule and give any opinion, because that would hamper any possible peace negotiations. Well, what we've heard this morning is that every single country we've heard said that it's the UN and this court, the highest UN court, who has to give this opinion, because it will clarify any legal consequences before any negotiations could take place. So very strong statements coming from the court this morning, all agreeing and very much lashing out against what the United States and a few other countries have said in the days before.
Step Vasson, they're keeping an eye on those court proceedings for us in The Hague. Thanks so much, Step. Well, let's now bring in Marwan Bashara.
So there we have it, folks. More funny men in funny costumes, minus the funny wigs, funnily enough. That is funny. Using legalese and like unambiguous language to stop anybody calling a spade a spade. It really, really, really does my tits in. When will there be somebody come to the forefront of politics, of any of the shit, that doesn't talk pish and gobbledygook? Can you find them? Because if they're off to Oxford and Cambridge and the like debating clubs, isn't they? Get it? Got it. Good. So going to keep an eye on it. That's interesting. Although nothing will happen. The United Nations, the United Nations Court in The Hague, fuck all, will happen. A lot of posturing, and the fucking killing will go on. Get cheese, no cats or cheese were needed for this filming. And remember, citizens, always subscribe, hit the notification bell as well, and $19.95 plus shipping and handling will keep you out of hell.